The hits just keep on coming, and man, I would love to just wake up one day and not have the Lions be in the news because there is yet another Lions thing going on. Now, it's been long rumored that the Lions would lose both coordinators this coaching cycle. Ben Johnson obviously taking the head coaching gig with the Chicago Bears, which became official today and was reported yesterday. I made a video on that you can go see. And now Aaron Glenn seems to be on his way out as well. It was reported early Tuesday that Aaron Glenn was going to have his in-person interview with the New York Jets, and the plan from the Jets was to not let Glenn leave the building without a deal. Now, it's not official at the time of recording this, but if you're seeing it, then it is official because I'm just pre-recording, because it seems pretty likely that that's where Glenn is going to end up. So what are the Lions losing with Aaron Glenn? What are the New York Jets gaining? And how are the Lions going to fill that void? All excellent questions. Now, for starters, Aaron Glenn is not like most coaches. He was part of the original Dan Campbell staff, and that was a staff that was comprised of a lot of former players, including Glenn. Now, in his playing career, Aaron Glenn played for 15 seasons as a corner for the likes of the Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints, the New York Jets, the Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jaguars. He played a lot, and for a lot of teams, he started a lot of games. He was a very good corner. After wrapping up his playing career, he started his coaching career in Cleveland as an assistant secondary coach. And then after that, he moved on to the New Orleans Saints coaching staff, where he was the DB's coach for 5 seasons before becoming the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions when Dan Campbell came over as well. During his time with the New Orleans Saints, he garnered quite the reputation, as some of his work included Marshawn Lattimore's breakout, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Marcus Williams, just to name a few. In fact, Glenn was one of the hottest defensive coordinator candidates at the time when Dan Campbell was originally hired, so when the Lions were able to land him, it was quite a big deal at the time. And since coming to Detroit, his defense has been up or down. Glenn is a very divisive figure in the Lions fan base because his defense has hardly been consistent over those 4 seasons. Now, some of that is due to the style of coach that Glenn is and the style of defense he ran. Some of it is things that are out of his control, but it is worth noting that he was hardly a perfect coordinator while he was in Detroit. So if you're a New York Jets fan, this is going to be very fascinating because it is a completely different defensive system than Robert Saleh was running in New York before. And yeah, I don't know how it's going to work. Aaron Glenn is the man cover guy. He loves running man coverage, and he will run it, well, until it don't work, which he often did in Detroit. Now, obviously, the Jets have a lot of guys that can run man coverage effectively, Sauce Gardner being one of those standout names, but it is going to be an interesting translation how this man-heavy, blitz-heavy approach, translates to New York. And now the question facing Detroit is, how do you want to replace Glenn? Do you want to maintain some of the same principles, hire from within? Kelvin Shepherd is a popular candidate if that is the route they choose. Or do you want to go with an outside hire and reshape the defense a little bit and try to shape it into something new? Both are valid options. I will say if they want to do a different approach with the defense, most of the Lions defense has been shaped to work into Glenn's schemes. So I don't know how well they'll translate. I don't know how well a Terrion Arnold, for example, or a Carlton Davis would translate to a zone-heavy system. Or actually, we know that Carlton Davis had some struggles with the zone-heavy scheme in Tampa ever since they won their Super Bowl, but then he had a resurgence this season playing more man. So, I don't know. Maybe you do want to stick with that. I talked about it with Ben Johnson and the replacement candidates for him that the Lions would likely stay in-house. But with Glenn, I will say there is a much more likely chance that the Lions go with an outside hire and try to get a fresh perspective in the building. But back to what the Jets are getting, you are going to get someone who is, first of all, he is a leader of men. If you look at Dan Campbell and you say, I love the way he leads the team, Glenn is cut from the exact same cloth. If you go back and watch Hard Knocks from the 2022 offseason featuring the Lions, Aaron Glenn and at the time running backs coach Deuce Staley would often be jawing at each other all practice. There was a lot of trash talk in those training camp scrimmages, defense versus offense. Like, Glenn loves to get into it, and you can tell he still has the same passion and energy he did when he was a player. One of my favorite moments from Glenn is when he gave a speech to the team. I believe it was either on Hard Knocks or on a Inside the Den episode, which is the Lions kind of behind the scenes documentary that they post on their YouTube channel, where Glenn addressed the team, and this was before the Lions rebuild had fully taken shape. And he was talking to the team. He asked, how many of you guys, when you were in college, were used to winning? You would get to that point at game day and you would expect to win. And then he said it was time to get back to that. And that was the way he gave that speech. It was just so you wanted to run through a wall for it. It was just awesome. Quite frankly, it's just awesome. And Glenn is an awesome coach. He's also talked in the past on how he tries his best to really connect with the players. Tracy Walker. Glenn told the story of how Tracy Walker, a former Lions safety, once came over to Glenn's house and they were just hanging out, watching film, talking about the defensive structure, and Walker mentioned to Glenn that he had never been able to go to a coach's house before. Again, being a former player, Glenn knows how to relate to his players. He knows what they need to succeed. He knows how to kind of manage the different personalities. He knows what it feels like to lose. He knows what it feels like to win. And for that, he is going to be a great fit. And despite his defense being rather inconsistent in his time with Detroit, there was one principle that they always maintained, and that was being really good against the run. After starting the season 1-6 in 2022, the Lions' run defense completely turned a corner and became one of the best in the league if you exclude a Christmas Eve game against the Carolina Panthers. And then in 2023, they were the second best in the league. This season, obviously, they had a lot of injuries, but they were still a very good unit, at least in the run defense aspect. And his secondaries and pass defense did show improvement over his tenure. Of course, the injuries this year kind of derailed that, but when they were healthy, they were a very good unit. But that's not to say that Glenn didn't have his deficiencies. Those games over the years against Geno Smith and the Seahawks, to name a few, where Geno Smith would just routinely torch them. And his showing in the divisional round against the Washington Commanders wasn't great. He didn't have the best game plan, and the underneath and screen game that Washington implemented was very effective. And Jaden Daniels was able to take easy completions all day long, and it just overall didn't work. Now, just like Ben Johnson, it's going to be very interesting to see who he takes with him from Detroit. I know there's some early rumors that Clint Kubiak might be his offensive coordinator, which obviously wouldn't hurt Detroit at all. So I don't know what to expect with both of these guys. It seems like the amount of people they're going to take from Detroit might have been lower than expected, but it also could be because Dan Campbell has been getting his assistants ready for promotions in case these two left, which obviously Johnson did, and Glenn's departure seems imminent as well. Now, one last note, there is another benefit for the Lions of Glenn being hired away, and that is compensation for the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule, as I'm sure you guys all know, is the NFL's effort to encourage hiring minority coaches and managers. And if you are a team that has developed one of these minority coaches and managers for prominent roles, you will be compensated with draft picks. So Glenn getting hired as head coach will result in the Lions getting third-round picks this year and next year, which, considering they don't have a third-round pick this year, is very huge. And, I'll never turn down a free draft pick. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts, whether you're a Lions fan and you are either upset or happy if Glenn's leaving. Let me know what you thought of Glenn's tenure with the Lions. If you're a Jets fan, let me know what you think of the Glenn hire and how you think he will help your team going forward. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Click like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you loved it. And again, I will be back later in the week with a conference championship preview, so be on the lookout for that. But another quick video because another coach got hired away. And yeah, cheers everyone.